So this is another very quick video, also not something I've really done before, but I thought it'd be easier for me to get my ideas out in a video. So there have been some arguments erupting about whether or not I have been presenting real Jungian typology. In response, I have reevaluated my work in comparison to the sources and comments made, and would like to present where I believe I stand in relation to Jung, and some of you may find this more relevant to you than others. I've just noticed that this is starting to become a recurring theme, and I just wanted to set my own understanding of things straight. Now, as I specifically stated in my first video, Jung's work is ambiguous. It was wishy-washy, it was free-flowing, and was not made with the intention of being standardized for the public, but simply to record observations and theories. The accusation leveled against me by some is that because I do make use of such standardizations made by Isabel Myers, von Franz, celebrity types, and myself, that I am not representing Jung, but merely pop psychology interpretations of Jung, and therefore shouldn't be referring to my interpretations as Jungian typology. As I stated in my first video, I am not a pure Jungian. That is, no, I am not just giving you Jung's words without any interpretation whatever. If I were to do that, I would just be reading Jung's own words to you in my HAL 9000 voice. If anyone has mistaken me for a pure Jungian, I apologize for not making that more clear before. I am not a pure Jungian, but I am a Jungian. I consider Myers, von Franz, celebrity types, and myself all, quote, Jungians because our work and thoughts are all clearly derived from Jung's original ideas and always make clear references back to him. I don't think it's possible to say anything other than Jung's original words without giving some degree of interpretation and standardization to what he said. For instance, if a test were created to do away with the functional stack and the idea of functional axes, and only test for the most differentiated attitude function, and then the possibility of a less differentiated auxiliary function, this is still an interpretation, or distinguishing of certain statements by Jung over others. It assumes that everyone does in fact have a distinguished function type, that is, a dominant cognitive function, as Myers might say, with a secondary function. But Jung stated in the very first words of chapter 10, quote, "In the following pages I shall attempt a general description of the types, and my first concern must be with the two general types I have termed introverted and extroverted. But in addition, I shall also try to give a certain characterization of those special types whose particularity is due to the fact that his most differentiated function plays the principal role in an individual's adaptation or orientation to life. The former I would term general attitude types, since they are distinguished by the direction of general interest or libido movement, while the latter I would call function types. The implication here seems to be that some people are only extroverted, with no defining function along with it. They're not extroverted thinking, they're just extroverted. Or introverted with no particular function, they're not introverted thinking, while others are introverted thinking. They're differentiated that way. However, later on he says, I have no desire to give my readers the impression that such pure types, such as a pure introverted thinking type, occur at all frequently in actual practice. He doesn't say they don't occur. He says they are very infrequent in his experience. Of course, he may be wrong, but he's pretty darn sure. But the point is, it's ambiguous to some degree. I don't blame anybody for making the connection and treating it as true for all intents and purposes. But it's still a connection, it's still an extrapolation to some degree. But it is derived from Jung, and so I at least call it Jungian typology. The question would then arise as to whether the, quote, pop psychology tests and descriptions that the community is starting to turn on would also be defined as Jungian typology. I've got two concerns with that statement. That seems to assume that pop psych is a clear definition and they're all in their own little category, as though they're on some particular website that's responsible for the whole thing. But that's not the case, and I'm not entirely sure what the term pop psych is actually supposed to mean. Besides, I don't like these tests and descriptions, and I think mine are better, so I call them pop psych. The real question we should be asking is whether or not the test and description are actually useful and really enlighten us on personality. I think it would be brash to say that all of those kinds of tests have nothing whatever good in them. The problem I have with them is not that I think they're totally nonsensical, but that they, for various reasons, don't represent the full depth of personality that I've read in Jung. We seem to mix up this question with, quote, did Jung actually say that? I myself have, to some degree or other, posed this question in earlier videos. Did Jung actually say that? But if I have, in any case, I'd like to retract that, because to be perfectly honest, I don't care whether or not Jung said it. I care if it's true and works, whether it comes from Jung, von Franz, Myers, celebrity types, David Kiersey, John Barnes, Yeghor, Heavy Mole, Mohammed Al-Shafray, Matovu Namikaze, I'm sorry if I butchered your names, or anybody else, because there's a lot of people who have made a lot of great comments on my channel, and I would love to give you all a shout out, I just don't have time right now. I find that Jung's original work is extremely enlightening and fascinating, and I try to base my work off of him as much as possible. But do I use him as scripture? No. I don't think he was right all the time, and I think he left his work ambiguous so that his readers could continue his work and make their own extrapolations. I think that function axes, which were an interpretation and extrapolation made mainly by von Franz, who worked directly with Jung and interpreted things he said, and function stacks, which was another interpretation and standardization made by Myers, I think they're both useful ideas, and I think they are valid interpretations of Jung. I have come to understand, for instance, that Myers, contrary to popular belief and my own belief for a time, did not, quote, screw up Jung's work, but she understood it very well and created what I consider a valuable addition to it, whether you agree with all of it or not. This is something that I learned from celebrity types, by the way. Such are interpretations of Jung, and therefore Jungian. The only question is if you think they are useful interpretations, and not whether or not they say exactly what Jung said, or agree with him on every point. So, to summarize all that, have I been presenting Jungian typology? Yes, I believe I have. Have I been presenting pure Jung to you? No, I have not. However, I am considering making a new series of videos that discusses Jung's psychological types and specifically what he says in there. Each of you, I'm sure, has probably heard at some point somebody say to you, "You don't know what you're talking about. You go back and read Jung." Only to find that Jung is nearly impossible to read unless you have some kind of philosophical context that people seem to take for granted when they recommend that. For instance, his Kantian-based definitions of object and subject. I had no idea about that when I went into Jung, and I didn't understand a word he said until I finally figured that out. And that's really the reason that I got into making these videos in the first place, because there seemed to be this massive gap between people like me who just took this Myers-Briggs test and thought it was really, really cool and wanted to know more about Jung, and those who are already certifiable experts in Jung and never actually seem to explain the foundations so that a layman could really understand them. So I wanted to bridge the gap there, and I'm not saying if I have. A lot of people seem to think I have. It took me a long time to figure out what I think I figured out, and I still have a lot to learn. People seem to have found my descriptions useful and have helped them to bridge that gap, and I'm going to continue to make these videos in the future. I'm thankful for your support. I hope I didn't get too fiery or anything here. By the way, Mohammed Al-Shafray, I'm sorry I'm butchering your name. I'm going to put a link in the description because he's made a website that it's not a finished test, he's still working on it, but he's more of a pure Jungian than I am, and I think he's got some good points to make. I don't agree with him on every point, but I think he deserves some recognition. So he's in the description. I'm going to put a few more links in the description that you might find useful, and I hope you found the video useful. Thank you.